machine abductions, and specific to the individual who is wanting to develop that upper outer glute. I mean, we've talked about this probably on other podcasts, I imagine, but when we're looking at someone who is finding that they can't make that jump, whether it be in weight or even visually, they're just not seeing that kind of development. And this is used as an ancillary movement. It's after movements that are already ensuring that the glute med is stabilizing. One of the things that I see quite a bit of is either the machine itself is, I mean, it's just janky. It's designed in a way that really starts at the mid-range and, I mean, goes into the shortened range, but even then, depending on the individual structure, it can be really challenging to maintain that. When you're opting for someone, or when you're working with someone who has very specific goals around the glute med, do you find that I mean, obviously, if they have a great abduction machine, like, of course, full send, or if you have workarounds around it with just increasing the amount that they can spend in a lengthened position off the initiation, do you find that people are able to benefit more from maybe even switching to a cable abduction or even like a hip rotary? I mean, depending again on the setup, depending on the machine itself, it just might be designed very poorly to begin with. Is that something that you'll progress someone from, just given the limitations of how the machine is built?
I am pretty, for as much nuance as I talk, I'm pretty straightforward and basic. And to that point, like, I don't get into the most elite level advanced nitty gritty clients that can exhaust every other potential avenue for growth. But that said, I still stand by this as a premise. Progressively overloading things in proportionality to each other should help you experience proportionality and growth of, in this example, the glute max, which is going to be your primary hip extensor, the primary lifter in most of your glute-based exercises, obviously like hip thrust, split squats, step-ups, B-stance RDLs in general, the whole complement of them. The more unstable of a variable or a variation that you use, it should recruit the glute med as you're introducing as a lateral hip stabilizer to enable you to harness the glute max as much as possible. If you're progressively overloading the movements that progressively overload and target the glute max, by proxy, you should be experiencing progressive overload at the glute med as well, to a proportional degree. That's the same exact thing I just said. Is I'm going to do barbell rows, but I still should probably go and do bicep curls. That's the same premise here. So focusing the peak of your effort in the same bread and butter, B-stance RDLs, split squats, anything that's unilateral and ideally less stabilized for you that you have to do yourself. That is a way to grow glute max for sure, but then proportionally keep increasing the stimulus experienced, or maintaining the stimulus, I guess is more accurate, experienced by the glute med, such that everything grows over time proportionally. But then to pepper in something in excess of that to grow a lagging body part, that's extremely common and recommended anyways. So it comes down to now what you're describing as which is my machine or which is my movement of choice. And honestly, yours literally the basic kickback done well. And I guess the kickback, it could be more of like a step up or a donkey sort of style, if I'm using the right terminology. This is your world more than mine. But that's effectively like you're driving back with the full foot pressure, almost like completely in line with your body. Whereas a more conventional kickback, you can align it to be kind of glute maxy, but I don't know why you would. I would go more glute med. You'd be able to, essentially you're standing maybe slightly hinged over, and you're using a cable attached to the ankle, and you're sweeping your leg in specific muscle fiber directionality with that glute med. And that's where I don't take exception per se, but I think the programming and the ideology behind, say, an abduction machine, the glute med, all the glutes for that matter, they're oblique style of muscles. They're rounder style of muscles, meaning that it's not just a straight line exercise that will really line up with them perfectly. And that doesn't mean no gains, but what it means is that if you're going to have the opportunity to choose an exercise that would align with the muscle fiber angles as much as possible through as much of the range of motion as possible, probably do that. So big basics, go team. Split squats, B-stance RDLs, all the things. Kickbacks on a cable, scale to your stability, scale to directly target the glute med as best as humanly possible, both in terms of your lineup and your execution, but also the load and sets and reps. if you were to do the abduction machine, I view it as it's Salt Bay on top of the cake. Same with the rotary, same with a lot of the other exercises that you mentioned, where I'm not going to deny their targeting of the generic area of choice, the glute med, but the abduction machine being a straight line, it's not going to hit the full like spread or range of motion excursion of that particular muscle that you're targeting, which to me, again, to pull this into an analogy that's pretty common for people, think of a leg press versus a split squat or even a free squat where you just ass to grass. Most leg presses are not going to let you get as deep just because it's a specific machine that may not be aligned with your specific structure, right? You'll still get a good range of motion, but as you alluded to in one of the descriptions of the exercises, maybe you're just hitting a mid-range to the fully locked out position more than you're getting as deep as, say, a squat or split squat. Cool. Then load it as such because it's putting you in a stronger position. So the leg press probably do sets of, 8 to 10 with 1 to 2 RIR, probably 0 to 1 RIR is whatever you're going to go for. But you're taking advantage of the fact that it pockets you in this stronger, more stable position. The same would be said in, say, an abduction machine. And don't get me wrong, there's a short runway of progression and the lifespan of that machine in general because you're going to cap it out eventually. It's not the be all and end all of your growth. It literally would have to be placed at the end for almost everybody almost immediately to have any value because you would be way too strong earlier in your workout to get stimulus from it. But that's the way I look at it, is it's not going to provide the same value for a plethora of different reasons.
Now, I think on that, like, we're very aligned with the exercise organization and understanding what the benefit is by placing something either earlier on or later in a workout and the return that even on your best day you can get from it. I think in this space, I mean, you see a lot of emphasis on, well, I'm a glute specific athlete. That's all I need. In the case of a bodybuilder, I just want my glutes to grow. I don't want anything else to grow. And truly, I think that kind of robs you of glute development inadvertently if you're only selecting those isolation movements that have drawbacks, limitations in how they can be loaded. And that was probably the biggest difference I saw in my own physique, was switching not just to a lot of unilaterally loaded movements, but also just organizing my workouts in a way that allowed me, it's that time of the afternoon, I guess, allowed me to load them meaningfully, but also load that target tissue. So for listeners who think, I know we've covered this, I know, but I also know there are new listeners here, so I'm going to make you repeat this. For listeners that, are set up on something like a squat, an RDL, a hip thrust even, and are trying to double dip. They're trying to work the glute max, but we cannot forget about the glute med. We got to have that banded loop. We got to have something that tells our glute med or abductors to work. What, dismantle this, please,
Okie dokie.
for me.
There's a time and place for everything. I will defend to the death people's right to use bands around their knees, primarily because I'm gonna go deep on this. So you just have your drink. I'm just gonna pop off for a while. Bands around the knees have been a thing that's been around for a long time from the standpoint of athletic development in like more collegiate space because they're just, it's deemed effective if they perceive some benefit. Got it. All the way obviously through to the advent of glute training and its rise to prominence, and even now distilling into, say, warm-ups or being used around the knees continuously for some people in major movement patterns. I'm gonna white knight the shit out of using banded bands around your knees for warm-up movement patterns. Let's go. Because whether you realize what it's doing or not, it's still doing what it's doing. And it doesn't mean that it's the most effective way of doing it, but it does mean that it may have some effect. And if you do it and it makes your training better, go for it. Is it growing your shit? Nah, not really. But is it making the things that will grow your shit better? Yeah, that's the thing that we care about. So if it helps you, cool. What's happening when you put any sort of I'm not going to brand name. I was about to, but I'm not going to brand name anything. If you're putting a band around your knees and doing, say, monster walks, or like even just straight up doing abductions against it, chances are for you to quote unquote feel your glutes the best, which is what we're all after. you're probably going to be doing a checklist of criteria that will then carry forward into you feeling your glutes the best, but also having better technique in the things that will actually be meaningfully growing your glutes. And what that means is you'll probably have full foot pressure or better foot pressure. You're probably going to maybe skew towards your heels, but I would encourage you not to. But you're going to have more of a hinged posture with your hips slightly back and ideally not hyperextended T-spine, getting a little bit more of your rib cage over your pelvis. If you do those things, full foot pressure, slight hinge, true brace, your hip abductions, your monster walks, especially in the monster walks, people will gravitate towards that. It's going to help target your glutes more effectively. But more than anything else, it is going to pump blood, give you a proprioceptive feedback cue. It's going to get you in a position where you'll probably, quote unquote, also feel squats, RDLs, hip thrusts better because you've warmed up the area. You've given yourself proprioceptive landmarks to continue to do the technique a little bit more right. But the takeaway is that doing sets of 20 on a banded hip abduction or monster walks isn't necessarily outright growing you. It's subconsciously training you to be in a better position because you feel your hips better when you're in a better position to target the hips. They have been biomechanically placed in a more advantageous position to be recruited. Ribcage over pelvis, circumferential core brace, full foot pressure, maybe slight hinge. That's the hips spot. That's where they excel. Carry that forward now into your squat, into your RDL. Those are the things that are going to really be loadable and really actually cause your glutes to get close to failure. But all of a sudden, that same general criteria, they appear there as the standard issue technique. Full foot pressure, ribcage stacked over pelvis, slight hinge, like to maintain a core brace and to align to avoid rather anterior pelvic tilt or a ribcage flare. Got it. They do similar things. And so if you need like a one-word cue to bridge that gap as a coach and someone just does a really good job and they enjoy it and they got autopilot, it makes them better, cool. However, as your training age advances, if really at any training age, but especially as your training age advances and you get stronger and you continue to use a band around your knees in the actual exercises themselves, that's where it starts to be a little bit more of a net negative for your training because you can only produce force maximally in so many directions at the same time. I would argue one direction. So as you start to gain a affinity for keeping yourself in the right position without a band, lean into that. When you put a bar on your back and your primary goal is to fall down and not get crushed to death, you don't want your knees to be getting caved in by a band the whole time and then causing you to think about spreading your knees out against the resistance of that band. What you want to be thinking about is rigidly stabilizing your entire spine into your legs and then standing up, quad and glute drive. That's what you need to be thinking about. If you're being distracted by having your knees caved in by a band, all of a sudden it's going to dramatically reduce A, coordination potentially, but B, the amount of maximal effort you can drive into the other direction that's more meaningful for growing your glutes outright. So as a warm-up tool, no harm, no foul. It's not going to cause you to miss a lift. It's not going to cause you to have like a chronic amount of overtraining or fatigue. As a in the exercise tool, probably ditch it not even almost immediately, just ditch it immediately because it's going to start being a distraction from you actually executing the technique that's going to cause you to have the greatest amount of progress.
I mean, that was even better than previous times that we've gone there, but I think that really does cover the full spectrum of individuals who they don't have the proprioception to understand where they're supposed to be in time and space. But then once you put load in, it's like, how many distractions can you tolerate? And for me, I would say like my training age is pretty high and there's still a lot of thought that goes into these movements. And there's very few movements where I can perform them, load the muscle maximally, take this set to near failure. I don't want to say effortlessly without those intrinsic cues of shifting, I don't know, pushing through the big toe, making sure that the pelvis is stable.